Welcome to the Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021 regular meeting of the Walnut Creek City Council. This meeting is being held in accordance with the Brown Act as currently in effect under the State Emergency Services Act, the Governor's Emergency Declaration related to COVID-19, and the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 issued on March 17th, 2020 that allows attendance by members of the City Council, city staff, and the public to participate and conduct the meeting by video conference. Video conference locations are not open to the public. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek City Council meeting or their first teleconferencing meeting, I wanted to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. For each agenda item, there will be an opportunity for public comments on the item. Thus, if you desire to speak to an item on the agenda this evening, please hold your comments till the council considers that item. Additionally, we have a section on the agenda titled Public Communications, which is for public comments for items not on the agenda. Any comments during public communication should not relate to an item that is on the agenda this evening. Consistent with section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be initially allocated for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the meeting if necessary. This process is consistent with section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, which was adopted July 15th, 2014 and amended on September 3rd, 2019, and will allow for all public comments to be received during the meeting for items not on the agenda. When I open the public comment period, use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, which will alert staff that you have a public comment that you would like to provide. We ask that everyone who wishes to speak on an item, please use the raised hand feature to state your intent to speak when the item is called. Please wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name and your city of residence for the record. Please keep in mind that this is a city business meeting. The City Council has adopted rules of decorum to ensure that meetings are conducted efficiently and effectively, and that all members of the public have a full, fair, and equal opportunity to be heard. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council. Please do not use profanity during your comments. As the council is conducting these meetings via video conference, and given the COVID-19 pandemic and the increased number of speakers that have wanted to make comments on various issues during our meetings, and consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. The council will accept oral comments. Written comments submitted have been and will be posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into the record. To provide a live remote public comment, join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID and the password are the ID is 920-2902-6075. The passcode is 807829. Should you choose to not provide comments but would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways. YouTube Live, you can visit the City Walnut Creek's YouTube channel. Cable broadcast on Comcast Channel 28 in the incorporated Walnut Creek City, or Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 29, and AT&T U-verse Channel 99. And it live streams online on the city's website. So at this time, I'd like everyone to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Darling.
Here.
Councilmember Haskew.
Here.
Councilmember Silva.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Here.
And Mayor Welk.
Here. All right. Our first item is a proclamation, and I will read this first. Whereas March is American Red Cross Month, a special time to honor the kindness of our volunteers and neighbors who aid families in need every day in the city of Walnut Creek, across the United States and around the world. Their dedication touches millions of lives each year as they carry out the organization's 140-year mission of preventing and alleviating suffering. And despite the difficult challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, people have stepped up to help others in need. Whether it was responding to this year's record-breaking wildfires and hurricanes across the country, rolling up their sleeves to give blood when our country faced a severe blood shortage, or supporting local partners to address urgent COVID-19 needs in our communities. And whereas last year in Contra Costa County, local families affected by 115 home fires relied on American Red Cross volunteers for comfort and hope, providing emotional support, addressing immediate needs, and helping families recover with emergency financial assistance or community resources. Contra Costa County residents donated 17,350 units of life-saving blood. 3,459 local community members took classes to learn skills that save lives, and 719 military members and their families received support and services, and humanitarian aid was provided internationally. And during last year's COVID-19 pandemic, American Red Cross worked tirelessly beside its government, public health, and community partners to coordinate training efforts and a shelter exercise to plan for response during high fire danger and a pandemic, while safeguarding the health and well-being of our volunteers, partners, and the people we serve. And whereas when large disasters like the lightning complex fire started in Contra Costa County, the American Red Cross and local partners were prepared to respond by opening temporary evacuation sites and non-congregate shelters to provide lodging, food, and services until our evacuated residents could return home. As these devastating wildfires broke out around Northern California, Contra Costa Red Cross volunteers deployed virtually and in person to help neighbors in other counties and other disasters around the country. And whereas this life-saving work is vital to strengthening our community's resilience, nearly 200 years since the birth of American Red Cross founder Clara Barton, we dedicate this month of March to all those who continue to advance her noble legacy, and we ask others to join in their commitment to care for people in need. And therefore, I, Kevin Wilk, Mayor of the City of Walnut Creek, on behalf of the Walnut Creek City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2021 as American Red Cross Month and encourage all Americans to support the American Red Cross organization and its noble humanitarian mission. Kevin Wilk, Mayor. And with that, I would like to ask Tom Terrell from the American Red Cross in Northern California Coastal Region if he'd like to say a few words.
Great, thank you, Mayor Wilk and members of the council. I think I am up and running here. Appreciate you taking your time out of your long agenda tonight to just recognize March as Red Cross Month. It has been a really challenging month. I'm actually a trained volunteer in disaster services and government operations. So when the EOC gets up and running, the Red Cross is there. It's certainly been a team effort this year. We actually had a staff training for your staff scheduled last year because in a disaster, people look to the city services first, and then you call the Red Cross in at that point. And so we look forward to getting that back scheduled again so that we can be getting all of your staff that are available to be trained so that if we did need that resource, we could do that. I want to just point out a couple of key things. First, the blood donation piece was huge this year. Rossmore has had some specific blood donation drives that have been very successful. They've been operated very safely and with all of the correct protocols. We've had to use a lot of hotel rooms this year instead of shelters, and in some cases still use shelters under new protocols. But I think it's been a teamwork year. It's pushed the Red Cross really hard, and they are responding in as they usually do, even to the fact that the 5 sites within the county that were set up as additional hospital facilities were all of that equipment that's in Richmond and at the fairgrounds and in Central County was provided in great extent by the Red Cross. So just appreciate your support, your staff support, and taking the time to do this tonight.
Thank you, Tom. I think the American Red Cross was the earliest, the first nonprofit I ever heard of. It must have been 6 or 7 years old. So great work. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, Councilmember Stoll.
To ask Mr. Terrell a question, if he can come back. Very good. I have always been impressed with the work of the Red Cross, and many of us probably believe that it is staffed primarily by paid staff, but I believe it's mostly volunteers based on an experience I had in New York City about 10 years ago. Perhaps if people are interested in volunteering, in retirement in particular, you might have information and like to just announce that tonight.
Yeah, thank you, council member. Yes, I believe when I'm on a Zoom call with our area that there are no more than 2 or 3 paid staff. When there is a fire in the middle of the night, that is a Red Cross volunteer that gets up and goes out to the site and gives the vouchers and the support wherever that happens in the county. So you start by just going online. There's a very easy path. They do a lot of training, even within COVID. Most of it is online training now. So I would say probably 95% of the people I come in contact with are volunteers. And when the EOC gets opened up, that's a Red Cross volunteer that's been trained to be sitting there working with the sheriff and the Confire folks in the county. So yes, that was a great question. And please go to the American Red Cross website and you will be very much welcomed and meet an awful lot of interesting people of all walks of life. And certainly retirement is a piece of that, but there are an awful lot of younger folks that find that their companies value that time as well and are donating that time.
Thank you. All right, next we have a presentation on the Kinder Morgan pipeline update. And if we could have Heather Ballinger, our Public Works Director, introduce the item.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Wilk and City Council. For the record, my name is Heather Ballinger. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Walnut Creek. So at your council meeting on January 19th, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Office of Spill Prevention and Response, OSPR, provided an update on the Kinder Morgan pipeline leak that occurred in late November in 2020. Tonight, there's a representative from Kinder Morgan here to provide you another update on the remediation efforts and the next steps. Alan Four, who is the VP of Public Affairs with Kinder Morgan, is here tonight. So since that last presentation, the California Fish and Wildlife OSPR is no longer the lead agency. The regulatory agency now that is the lead is the Regional Water Quality Control Board. The US EPA and California Fish and Wildlife OSPR, they're still involved. And if there were a sheen to be rediscovered in the channel, they would be notified within 30 minutes. But I think what the change indicates is that the work is transformed from emergency cleanup phase to a long-term remediation. So just by way of background, on November 20th in 2020, Kinder Morgan reported to Cal OES a loss of pressure due to a damaged pipeline that resulted in a gasoline spill into the soil. That first week, that leak was down by South Broadway in Walnut Creek. In that first week, Kinder Morgan, they fixed the leak and they thought that only a minimum amount of gasoline has been spilled. However, on December 3rd, the Department of Fish and Wildlife OSPR received a report that there was sheen in the flood control channel, the San Ramon bypass, located there by the Iron Horse Trail and Civic Park in that area. So initially we thought that those two incidents were unrelated. However, in early December, it was determined that they were related, and 750 to 1,000 barrels, which is around 31,000 to 42,000 gallons of product, was released into the channel and had daylighted in that area. Once the spill was identified to be that significant, personnel from California Fish and Wildlife OSPR's response team was deployed, and they became the incident command, along with other agencies that were involved. So as of today, 462 barrels have been recovered, and that's about 19,000 gallons. So tonight, I'm going to turn it over to Alan Four, and he's going to provide you with the current status of the remediation efforts and the plans going forward. And then we'll both be available for any questions. And with that, I think Alan is on the, is he here? Brought in? There he is.
Thank you, Heather, Mayor Wilk, and members of the council. My name's Alan Four, Vice President with Kinder Morgan. and wanted tonight to give another update on the status of our recovery and remediation efforts related to the pipeline incident that Heather referenced. And we do appreciate the ongoing involvement and oversight of the city of Walnut Creek as part of the now Incident Command. I had a chance to meet with Heather and the city engineer today, this afternoon, out off of the Iron Horse Trail at the confluence area, and talk about what currently we're doing and what we're planning on doing moving forward. And the city is involved in a minimum of a weekly call with the Incident Command, as well as regular communication with Kinder Morgan and our representatives and others that are part of this effort. So we appreciate the diligence that the city has taken in making sure that information is shared with the public, updates are being made, and that information is being shared. Heather mentioned that we're at about 460 barrels of product recovered to date. The recovery effort is ongoing, but we are moving into more of a remediation phase. And what I mean by that is that if you had a chance to visit the site where most of the product was recovered, it was a pretty active, intense operation there with product extraction happening, lots of personnel, lots of equipment. And we have removed the significant amount of product that we believe is in that area. And we know that through the various wells we have put in place, the various potholing or coring we have done, and a variety of tests, as well as the extraction itself. So if you were to go out there today, what you would see is a much scaled down presence. We still have personnel in the area. Air monitoring continues. We do have vapor extraction continuing, and regular checking of the various wells and monitoring equipment we have in place. But we're moving more towards a remediation piece. And what that means is that we are installing monitoring wells, and we've installed 19 of those so far. In the area, in that particular area by the bridge, the Iron Horse Trail Bridge, and we'll eventually get them all the way back to the release site on Broadway. We're going to put in around 35 to start, and we'll likely put in more. And this is going to allow us to continue to monitor to see if there is any evidence of product and over the long term. So that process is already underway. We will also be installing soil vapor probes in the areas where we have installed wells. And we have also been engaged in testing of irrigation wells. We've conducted 6 wells, I believe, in the area near the drainage canal and the trail on individual properties, residential properties. Those tests are ongoing. We're actually going through another round of tests now, just to make sure that another layer of data to be sure that there's been no product migration into those particular areas. There's definitely a reduction in noise. That was one of the issues that we had with residents there off of Bradley Avenue, abutting the drainage canal. Those residents have all returned to their homes. And as I said, we were out there today. There is some noise from the vapor extraction equipment, but that's only going to be during daytime. We're going to reduce that to daytime, I believe, effective this evening, and then ultimately move that vapor extraction closer to the actual site, so further south. So there won't be any noise activity ongoing at that particular area where we've had the significant amount of activity so far. I believe I mentioned air monitoring is continued. We have several stationary air monitoring machinery and equipment that will be kept in place just to make sure that there's no issue with the air. And there hasn't been for some time, but we'll continue to do that. And then also, we're inspecting our line outside of the area of the incident. And part of that, and we've discussed this briefly at prior meetings, is determining if there are other portions of our pipeline that are impacted by roots from trees. And there are trees, as you know, all along our pipeline route, certainly on Broadway and other areas. So we're starting very soon with taking a look at those, and we've run internal inspection tools through the line, identified areas where we want to look at further. So what we're doing is we're going to be excavating through hand digging in those areas. We're waiting final approval from the county to do that. But basically, hand tools, we'll go out with hand tools so we won't damage the roots of the tree, at least initially. We don't want to remove the tree unless we have to. But then we'll get a closer look, get eyes on it, get equipment down into the ground to make sure that there is no other areas of the pipeline that have been compromised. So that will be ongoing over the next several months. I expect those approvals to be coming very soon. You know, the city's reviewed our analysis and the arborist report. So you may see that as early as next week, some activity out in Broadway Avenue digging around trees. So that's what that is. Not that there's any imminent threat or danger. It's just as a precautionary, proactive measure. And we'll be doing that first in 2 locations and then likely other locations throughout Walnut Creek. We haven't received any complaints. We did receive one actually today about the vapor extraction equipment over there by Rich's Auto Body Shop. And I think that was primarily a night issue. We're going to reduce that to just daytime issues, but we really haven't heard of any issues from the public since we've reduced the activity out there. There's really no odor in that area, which was another issue before. There was a smell of gasoline type smell that no longer exists. So we haven't had any complaints. If we get them, however, certainly the city, if they get them, they send them to us, or if any of you receive complaints, please refer them to us. When we move to remediation, it really is, we're not going anywhere. As I said before, and I know many of you may have questions about when will this be finished. Well, it's finished when the state of California says we finished. And that could be years potentially of various types of activity. Now, monitoring wells, once in place, are monitored several times a year, but there's really no invasive process that's going to be disturbing residents. So the bulk of the heavy activity, the heavy equipment, the noise, that type of activity, most of that is finished. We're still going to be digging some wells, as I mentioned before. So that's temporary 1 to 2 day activity. We'll have vapor recovery units also farther south. One in an area around Newell and Broadway, and another one possibly on the National Guard Armory site. Maybe 2 locations where we'll have vapor extraction for some time as we're continuing to remove product and test the air and things like that. So that will continue, but the bulk of the activity that did cause some consternation with residents, we won't see much more of that over the next several months. We are committed, of course, to a full cleanup and full remediation of this site. We're committed to it. It's required. And we'll be here as long as it takes to get the work done. So again, we're happy to keep the city updated. We appreciate the city's diligence. And I will tell you, Heather and others, it's almost every day we have some type of contact and communication. And we're also, from a residential standpoint, we talked today about when we move these vapor recovery units to different areas, making sure that the notification is made to those residents. So while there may be no disturbance, someone might see some equipment, see something, we're going to make sure we're very proactive about communication to folks so they know what's going on. They have a number and a person to contact if they have questions, and we appreciate Heather's efforts in helping us facilitate that, as well as the others at the city who have done that. So I appreciate again your attention tonight, and we look forward to continuing to work with the city for a complete remediation of this site.
Thank you, Alan. Does any members of the council have any questions? Seeing some shaking. I see one. Yes, Cindy.
I would let the other Cindy go first since she's our fish, game, wildlife, water expert. But in the meantime, thank you very much for being here this evening. And I was out there actually about 3 times over the last week, including today, and I have noticed considerable change and reduction in the level of activity. You mentioned that you would be putting in monitoring wells. Are those automatically monitoring so that you will be notified if there is a change in condition of the pipe over time?
There's not an automated system. We will be checking them. And initially we will be checking them frequently. I don't want to say on a daily basis we're checking these, but frequently. And then over time, these monitoring wells may well be placed for years. Then it will be a less frequent, unless there's some indication that there's a smell or an odor or something like that that would prompt us to come out. But it's not automatic, but it is frequent.
And then the other monitoring is the air and the vapor monitoring.
That's correct.
Is that automated as well, or do you have to just come out and check and see what's happening?
Well, we've had a couple of types of monitoring. We've had individuals who walk around and have devices that then they go back and put into a system that's out there. We actually have a truck on site that analyzes all this data. So all of that is compiled into that area. It's a good question about whether or not there's any ability to transfer that communication from, because we have a number of different types of devices out there. I know a lot of it's manual, but it's possible there may be some ability to communicate that otherwise. I can get back to you on that, but there is a daily review of data that's out there regarding air quality.
You mentioned that you have done an assessment or tested and inspected irrigation wells on 6 residential properties.
Yes.
Significant conditions identified?
No. We are retesting though. Some of the initial data was confusing and there were different interpretations. Nothing of a concern that would lead to any kind of a environmental issue or anything like that. Just some of the data that needed to be retested, and that's what we're in the process of now. But nothing we've seen that would be an indication that there's been a product migration towards those wells or in those wells.
Talking about the trees, as you look at those and determine if any of those trees along your corridor or our corridor where your pipeline is need to be removed, you will be talking with Public Works about that and going through the appropriate approval process. Yes.
So our initial and credit to Steve on this, your city engineer. When we first looked at this, we believed, we had an arborist take a look at it too. We believed that the excavation activity we were going to undertake would compromise the roots of the tree, which would require the tree to be removed. Steve helped us think a little differently on that, and we're able to do hand extraction for a first run and make some initial analysis and data recovery and get eyes on it, and then determine whether more activity needs to be taken for excavation. So it's possible we won't need to. Bottom line is we can do this first look without compromising the roots of the tree. After that, if we have to go back again, we'll consult with the city and the county again on next steps. But absolutely, this is going to be in consultation with the county and the city.
And you've referenced a single tree, but there are a number of trees along the corridor in which your pipeline runs.
Yes, there's 2 that we're starting with that we'll have approval on to do this initial hand excavation. There will be more.
And that just raises the question, is this the only, where are your pipelines in Walnut Creek, or is it just this pipeline, and does it basically stay within the Iron Horse Trail County Flood Control Channel corridor?
It does, not completely. It goes outside of that particular area. Our pipe is marked by markers, above ground markers throughout the city. So if we find areas that are, in areas that we have to do some type of excavation, whether trees or otherwise, as we do anywhere in California or in the country that potentially need excavation, we call them integrity digs, is what we call them. We'll be seeking approvals to do that. It really doesn't make any difference where it is as far as what we have to do, but the difference is what approvals we'll need, whether it's individual resident approval, if it's on private property, city, county, state, all those approvals for whatever dig or excavation we might have. But now, right now, we're starting with these two. And the others that we were looking at, I will say this, the others that we are looking at now would be tree-related digs, tree-related integrity digs, where we see something that has similar characteristics as the area that was compromised on the pipeline. Those are the ones that we're focusing on in the short term.
My last question, you mentioned you're moving the air vapor monitoring equipment to the National Guard site. I assume California National Guard has given you permission and a key, because
Yes, I think
we're not being presumptuous, are we?
well, but I think Councilwoman, I mentioned we plan to.
Okay.
So we are close to receiving approval on that. It's a lengthy process, as you can imagine, to have an approval from the National Guard. But we've been working with them for a couple of months now on that, and we're very close to getting it. Obviously, we won't go there until they have given us their final approval, but that's our preferred location for a variety of reasons. But ultimately, it's their decision. We think it's likely, but again, it's their final decision, which we don't have that final approval just yet.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Four, for the very comprehensive update. You answered all my questions except for one. Where would a resident go to get the latest update and information about the recovery efforts?
That's a good question. We file at least minimum monthly reports with the water district, and they are available for public information. Maybe I'll, Heather, defer to you on that. Is there a link on the city website that's easier for folks to access? Because I know those other websites and others can be a little more problematic.
There is a link that, so that would probably be the easiest location, Mayor Pro Tem, is to send them to our city website. And then there's a link that takes you over to the Kinder Morgan spill, and they can find it there. There's a geo tracker that is keeping track of it where they can log in, but I don't have the link to it memorized, but they can go there and see it.
I appreciate
the
that.
left side of the page.
I noticed it's linking to the Department of Fish and Wildlife website, and the last update was in February 11th. Should we now be pointing to the regional board, or will they do a similar monitoring update?
Yes, that's exactly right. So if that is, I didn't realize that wasn't updated. So we will get that updated.
Terrific. Thank you.
And we're going to initiate, there was a weekly resident update coming from California Department of Fish and Wildlife liaison. We're going to be initiating another update, and we can put in that update that we'll be sending out. Actually, Kinder Morgan will send out. We can put in that update links and communication to these various sites, so folks have a way to dive into the details if so interested.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, anybody, any further questions? Looks like I'm getting shaking of heads. Great. Well, Alan, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Mayor.
Heather, thank you too. Right, next on the agenda is the consent calendar. First, want to state the consent calendar items 2D, 2E, and 2F relate to compensation payable to the department directors, city manager, and city attorney. If these items are approved, each of the items rescinds the voluntary 2% compensation reductions and thereby increases the current compensation by 2% for the department directors, city manager, and city attorney effective March 7th, 2021. State law, specifically Government Code Section 54953, requires a verbal announcement of the compensation change prior to action by the city council. Now, at this point, does any council member wish to pull any item from the consent calendar for discussion? Councilmember Silva.
Yes, thank you. I would like to pull items 2E, F, and G, 2D, E, F, and G.
Okay, and I'll pull item 2H just to make it in a row. I don't see any other people that are pulling. So at this point then, let's ask if anybody from the public wishes to make a comment on the consent calendar. Please use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, if you would like to provide a public comment. For those who desire to provide public comment on a consent calendar item only, this is not public communication yet, please raise your hand now. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been and will posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into the record. At this time, I'll ask the city clerk if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comments.
Mayor, it does appear we at least have one hand raised for public comment.
Okay, then let's bring them in.
Okay, Jan Warren.
Okay, hi, Jan.
That was a mistake, and I took my hand back down. Sorry.
Okay, then.
I'll wait.
We'll talk to you soon. Okay, well, if there's nobody else then, is there first a motion on the consent calendar items that have not been pulled?
I move to accept items A through C and I through K.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Susie, could you please call the roll?
Sure, and that includes the revised minutes for February 16th and an updated cover page for the warrants.
Correct.
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois,
Aye.
and Mayor Wilk.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so let's go to the pulled items, and Councilmember Silva, we'll start with you on those.
Thank you very much. I pulled items D, E, F, and G as one in order to thank the employees in the confidential unit, the professional unit, and the general management unit, as well as our directors and our city manager and our city attorney for their efforts 8 months ago to take a reduction in pay this year in order to help us through this fiscal crisis. It is greatly appreciated. It did help us weather this storm, and we truly appreciate it, and thank you. And I will be happy to make the motion to approve items 2E through G, or 2D, E, F, and G.
So moved, and I'll second it as long as I'm unmuted right now. Susie, could we have the roll, please?
Councilmember Silva.
Aye.
Mayor Wilk,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great, and yes, thank you very much to staff for putting that together. And I'm pulling item 2H just to really highlight the restaurant grant program. During the rebound committee that Councilmember Silva and I are on board with on the ad hoc committee, we worked with staff and we're recommending changes to the restaurant grant program, where we're accepting some alternative financial documentation of a need to include submission of either a Q3 of 2019 and a Q3 of 2020 of a P&L statement, or the full 2019 and 2020 annual profit and loss statements. So it just gives a little bit more flexibility. We're also establishing a new level of grants. Essentially, it's a tier 2 for businesses with 10 to 24% loss of total revenue at the grant amount of $5,000 that if they're a full service restaurant, or $2,500 if they're a bar and a quick serve restaurant. And again, this is really a restaurant grant program that's been designed because these are the businesses that have had a lot of upfront costs, more so than any other businesses in the city. And they have to continue to have these costs, whether it's for winterizing in the past, providing accommodations for outdoor dining now, as well as when it's time, and hopefully we'll be in the red tier within the next couple of weeks, but when it's time to open up for indoor dining, these restaurants can't just flip a switch and they're open. They have to prepare, they have to get staff on board. They have a delay, unlike many other businesses that can just open their doors. And that's really why we created the restaurant grant program. It does not mean that we do not recognize that all of these other non-restaurant businesses have suffered tremendously in the last year. And we all understand and feel that pain with you. But we had to make the determination with the finite amount of money that we had to help a sector that was in dire need, and more so because their upfront costs and their costs for staying in business are extremely great compared to other businesses. So in any case, I will make the motion to approve that unless there's some other kind of discussion to have on the city council, and really appreciate the fact that we are able to help restaurants. I see our city attorney, Steve Mattis, raising his hand.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we would just note for the council's information that because the request of the council was very specifically defined from the ad hoc committee, we did go ahead and put together a resolution that is included in your packet, which would allow the council to act on the resolution to approve the changes. That would avoid the need to come back at your March 16th meeting on it.
Thank you, Steve. So with that, and knowing that we have the resolution in there, I will make the motion to approve item 2H along with the resolution.
I will second the motion, and I would augment as well that the other thing that restaurants experience is when they're suddenly shut down, they lose their inventory of food that is perishable. And so that continuous reinvestment in perishable items, meats, fruits, and vegetables, as can be significant. So thank you very much for your explanation.
And that's an excellent point as well. All right, we have a motion and a second. Susan, if you could read.
Mayor Wilk,
Aye.
Councilmember Silva.
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great. All right. Now let's get to that red tier. Help all these businesses. Okay. Next, we have on the agenda public communications. So this portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the council cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. Consistent with section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be allocated at this time for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communication for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the meeting if necessary. Does any member of the public wish to provide public comments at this time? Please use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, if you'd like to provide a public comment. For those who desire to provide public comments on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand now so that we can identify the total number of speakers that desire to speak at this time. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not separately be read into the record. At this time, I'll take note that the time is 6:44, and we will take public comments on items not on the agenda until approximately 7:14. And we'll just say 7. By the time I finish reading this, it'll be 7:15. And then the remainder of any such comments at the end of the meeting. City Clerk, are there any members of the public who would like to provide comments?
We do have multiple speakers. I can go ahead and bring them in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
First, we have Lydia Jung.
Hi, Lydia.
Hello, may I be heard?
You are heard.
Okay, hi, my name is Lydia Jung, and I'm here today just to continue to urge the City Council to prioritize and continue prioritizing the development of a 24/7 county-wide non-police mental health crisis response program, and to name the program after Miles Hall, since it was his case which brought awareness to the problems with our current approach to mental health crises. I would also like to echo Catherine's statements from February 2nd City Council meeting about how naming the program after Miles may help people remember the program because of his story and call it instead of the police when they see someone experiencing a mental health crisis. I have also personally observed at least 2 people who may have needed mental health assistance while walking to the BART station and getting gas in Walnut Creek. However, I did not feel comfortable calling 911 in either of these situations because I was afraid that the police would only make their circumstances worse. A 24/7 non-police mental health crisis response program with a phone number I could call would have made me far less worried for the situations of both of these people, and I believe could also foster a greater sense of caring in the community. While I don't live in Walnut Creek, I've spent a lot of time in the city for extracurricular activities, and the same can be said for most of my peers in Orinda. And I believe it is probable to think that law enforcement reforms that Walnut Creek undertakes or fails to undertake will have a significant impact on the residents and policies of other nearby towns. I urge the city to make this impact positive by prioritizing the non-police mental health crisis response program's development and being transparent about the way it carries out this and other reforms to the law enforcement system to help ensure that it gives marginalized citizens equitable treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we bring in the next speaker, Susie, I just wanted to quickly let anybody listening know that today the city sent a letter to Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, signed by the mayor, myself, communicating our support for Assembly Bill AB 988, the measure which would create a new 3-digit phone line for suicide prevention and immediate localized emergency response for individuals in mental health crisis by trained mental health professionals. This would implement the national 988 system in California so that people experiencing a mental health crisis can receive immediate care from trained professionals. This would potentially work in concert with a 24/7 mental health crisis response team operated by the county, of which Walnut Creek is a leading regional effort. And so I do appreciate Lydia's comments and wanted to make sure that everybody knew of some of the new events that have happened just in the last 24 to 48 hours. Now we're ready for the next speaker.
Next speaker is Michelle Sheehan.
Now you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, all. I'm Michelle Sheehan, a Walnut Creek resident, speaking on behalf of Save Seven Hills Ranch. In prior public comment, I have addressed the infirmities with Speaker Development's document in regard to the city's Lot A. But it's not really about the document. It is about retaining your influence over what happens at Seven Hills Ranch. Well, the ideal would be that the public finds a way to acquire and preserve this beautiful piece of nature within our city, a logical addition to our existing heavily used park. We may all have to settle for some development at the site. Shouldn't we ask for something more than the proposed plan? Something that retains some of the character of the land, allows some through walkways for Heather Farm Park users, allows some opportunities to enhance the creek channel, and maintains the incredible views from the ridgeline. Something better than a walled off, leveled down, inaccessible compound. Asking the county to deny the developer's request for a general plan amendment, which allows this intensity of development, is something you, as city's representatives, can do. Regardless of the work your staff has done to facilitate this development, it's still okay for you to say that this idea at this location is just too much. It isn't really about traffic or Lot A. Unless we find a way for public acquisition, whatever goes in at Seven Hills Ranch will generate noticeable traffic. Well, traffic is a huge concern for many residents. Our main concern is an opportunity lost. Please hear this message, an opportunity lost. Please retain your influence and ask for something better. This property deserves it. Your city park deserves it. Call to mind your park and its 1.5 million visitors per year. Call to mind the 2-acre nature area in that park that is used to exhaustion. Ask for something better, make something better happen. Please visit our website at save7hillsranch.org. Thank you for listening once again.
Thank you, Michelle.
Next speaker is Catherine Wally.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Catherine.
Great. Good evening, Council. It's Catherine Wally, resident of Walnut Creek. I'm an American Sign Language and English interpreter. This past year, many have become aware of my field of work, given the number of press conferences with interpreters present. What you may not be aware of, though, is that increasingly, the interpreters you see are deaf themselves. In my field, it's now best practice to stop assigning hearing interpreters for the audience-facing role, replacing us with deaf interpreters, because it is they who have the necessary cultural and linguistic expertise combined with life experiences that result in more effective interpretations. This improvement necessitated that hearing interpreters listen to the deaf community and recognize the harm accepting these types of assignments was having on our clients, community trust, and our profession. The best interpreters are those who recognize when they should turn down certain assignments, advocate others do the same, and work in solidarity with the communities we serve to develop systems to put this into practice. Our field welcomes hard conversations and the constant unpacking of our various privileges, knowing that if our frameworks for ethical decision-making remain stagnant, we will do harm. We aim to uplift those who challenge our ways of working, knowing that critical analysis of current practices is essential, even when that results in a relinquishment of our power and privilege. I say all this to ask us to consider why, when for decades members of communities nationwide have been saying that certain tasks should be assigned to non-police service providers, has there been no meaningful dialogue about these issues without first widespread protest or community organizing? Why is this the case when some in law enforcement privately agree change is necessary? In order to build a healthy community, we all must take a hard look at the culture and systems which penalize law enforcement, government officials, and community members alike for speaking up on behalf of change, anytime that change results in the relinquishment of power, privilege, and yes, funding granted to the police. And lastly, thank you all for the letter sent to Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan regarding AB 988. Together we can make change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Susan Miller.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Susan Miller. I live in Walnut Creek. I live in the Rancho Paraiso area, and it's recently come to our attention via our homeowners association that the city is planning on constructing a new mountain bike trail, mountain bikes only, in the Lime Ridge open space immediately adjacent to our development, and indeed with access in our neighborhood to that trail. We are against this project, which is so close and even within our neighborhood. We have not been involved to date, but apparently city staff has been working on this for quite some time. So we were very surprised that we just learned of this very recently. The concerns are too numerous to cover in 2 minutes, but they include increased traffic congestion, particularly in the vicinity of where the access would be, increased risk of fire, as staff is already admitting they're having problems keeping electric bikes out of the open space area, increased environmental impact and hill erosion, increased noise and disturbance to the residents, decreased capacity for the very many hikers and equestrians that use the whole area, and potential violation of existing open space agreements. So we would like to request a broader conversation with the residents of Rancho Paraiso before this proposal moves any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Next speaker is Ava Scattergood.
Good evening. My name is Ava Scattergood from Girl Scout Troop 33568, and I'm a 7th grader from Foothill Middle School. I am working on my silver award. My project is to help prevent deer getting hit by cars on busy streets, and my idea was to put speed bumps. What are some ways we can prevent this besides speed bumps?
You're on mute, Ava, if there's more to say.
That was my question.
So at this point, we are not really able to answer specifically on this particular item since it's public communication. I believe I'm actually speaking in front of your Girl Scout troop this week. I think it's Friday. I haven't looked at my calendar for the whole week yet. But we can certainly talk about some of the different ideas that can come up then, and we'll be working with our Public Works Department to come up with all sorts of different options that we can look at for a variety of different needs. Does that help for now?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Next speaker is Nikki Letcher.
Hi, Nikki, you're ready if you take yourself off mute.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're good.
I'm still not being. Good
No, we
evening.
can
Can
hear
you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Sorry. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I believe I'm speaking on behalf of the many small businesses within the community that represent the beauty industry, massage, gyms, and all of us feeling very unsupported by the narrow selection of the grant from the city going to restaurant businesses. And personally, I'm urging the council to start looking broadly at the businesses which have been more so affected, that when closed down, we lost 100% of our revenue. And when it's insinuated that we did not have expenses for PPP, we had to be 100% prepared at all times to open and had expenses that were astronomical. Yes, we didn't have to construct structures, but as for gyms, they had to equally provide structures like restaurants. And I'm talking about gyms, and that's not even my business, but I'm just trying to look out for every small business that exists in our community. So when I look at all the support that I have 7 salons in 7 different cities, 4 of them provided grant opportunities. And like at the federal level, state level, and local level, most of these looked at P&L analysis. They took the overall losses that we incurred from the pandemic. They then deducted the expenses that you had and came up with a good determination who was most in need of any support. And when you say that they lost a lot more because they had to have more expenses, at the end of the day, it's dollars and cents, it's economic analysis. And when you're shut down for 10 months and have lost 50% of your staff, when you are literally told tomorrow you can open, we cannot open unless our staff is trained according to state regulations, which takes us 3 weeks. So I urge you to support all of small businesses.
Thank you.
Next speaker is call-in user 1925-818-6530.
Good evening, Jan Warren here. Contra Costa County indicates they shared their climate emergency resolution with the cities in the county and encouraged cities to join them in declaring a climate emergency resolution. The state updates their building codes every 3 years, and as a city, we can adhere to those codes, or we can choose to encourage REACH codes. California state law SB 1388 creates a process starting January 2022 to put into place changes to reduce food waste, which is a big contributor to greenhouse gases and the warming of the planet. It's well known and proven that when goals are put into place by individuals, sports teams, businesses, industry, and government entities, the goals are more likely to be met or exceeded. Add incentives and the accomplishments are even greater. Consider that Ford Motor is coming out with 40 new EV models just next year. We have the greatest incentive of all, the health of our planet and family and human family siblings. I feel one of the greatest examples of leadership is to inspire people towards a reachable goal together. While the city has a great list of achievements on climate, the period of 2020 to 2030 is critical to set high reach goals. As each year we wait, it gets harder to reduce the impacts we're experiencing. Sometimes a statement may seem empty to some people, and so why is it necessary? Words matter, and matter even more when followed up by action, since we're playing catch up to reduce GHGs and the warming of the planet. I ask the council to pass a climate emergency resolution to encourage the residents of Walnut Creek to join in following the council's lead. The city's goal won't be achieved by just what the council does. We need the residents to act as well and to feel their participation is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Next speaker is Kirby Kay.
Hello, Mayor Wilk and council members. Thank you for your support tonight. And thank you for the laudable efforts with the restaurant grant. And I am talking as well to help urge you to try to find some more limited funds. I know the funds are very limited, and you're probably getting a lot of requests from a lot of different places due to the COVID issue. But it is true that restaurants aren't the only ones that are suffering, and a lot of the items that Mayor Wilk and Council Member Silva had, well, not so much Council Member Silva's comment, but Mayor Wilk had said about restaurants is also true for other service providing businesses. For example, having to restaff. I'm actually starting to train just now. We were able to open in January, and I'm still just now getting the first of our staff trained. Having to, as the previous caller had mentioned, having to be ready to open at any time, having to pay rent while we were closed, and being closed hard for 10 months, you know, takes a toll. So there are a lot of us out here, not a lot on the call or at the meeting tonight, but I wanted to take the time to, first of all, thank you guys. You know, I know it's not an easy job. And then second of all, urge you to see if there's any way to open it up to other businesses, because a lot of us have suffered like 100% revenue loss. So we weren't able to open for pickup or for side anything like that. I didn't have anything written, so I'm going off the fly. I wanted to jump on here before the meeting closed, and I appreciate your time tonight. Please do see if there's anything you can do for us. We're hanging on, and we do bring in clients and other things from other cities, so it is a boon for the restaurants as well.
Great, thank you. Kirby, before you go away, it looks like Councilmember Haskew has her hand up. Actually, Luella, I don't know if it's for Kirby or just in general, but
No, it's Kirby. I would like to know what his did he disappear? I would like to know what his business is, and does he have other people that he would like to highlight?
Well, so my business is an eyelash extension salon in the Orchards shopping center in Walnut Creek. There's also some other businesses, actually one that's next door, which is the massage business. They're still closed hard because they can only take, well, they're not closed hard, but they can only take certain clients with a medical letter from their doctor, stuff like that. I guess it would be for medical massage. But, and the Crunch Gym, which is in the same shopping center, was closed for a long time. They were finally able to open outdoors. But mostly for the service industry, because, you know, it's a perishable item, you know, not food so much, but the time that we have to do the services. If we're not in the salon and we're not available to do it, then that time that's there to have a person that we can work on is gone, and it's perishable that way. So
Thank you. Thank you for increasing my understanding.
thank you, Kirby.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, I don't see any additional hands raised for public comment.
Okay, then we will close public comment for the evening. There will still be comment, of course, on items that are on the agenda, but we'll close public comment now for the evening. Before we move on to council member and staff announcements, let me just ask, does any council member wish to have any questions for staff based upon comments that we heard, or comments that you would like to make based upon public comments that we heard? And I see Mayor Pro Tem Francois' hand shot right up.
Did. My timing was off, but I was ready. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question for our Public Works Director, I believe, and it's in regard to Ms. Miller's comment concerning the Trails Committee report and the potential new trails in Lime Ridge. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
And I'm wondering if you could educate me and perhaps the public on the status of that report and what the next steps in the process are and the opportunities for public comment.
Yes, the trail that the comment was referencing is a part of an overall plan that we've been working on. It's a management plan for both Shell Ridge and Lime Ridge in the open space. It was presented to our Pros Commission in December and then again in February. And again, particularly to that trail, we'll be back in front of Pros in April. And so on April 5th, we'll be coming back with an update on that plan. And one of the things we'll be discussing then is that flow trail that the caller was referencing. So we're not anywhere far along as she referenced. We've been just doing preliminary layouts and environmental review. And so we've heard a lot of the comments from the community, and we plan to have a lot of answers for them at the April 5th meeting with Pros. Does that help? Or
it does. Will April 5th be the date? Do you envision Pros will adopt the recommendations at that hearing, or will there be future hearings after April 5th?
I'm not sure. They could direct us either way. They could ask for more information and have us come back, or they could give us a definitive direction. On the overall plan, in the December meeting and in the February meeting, they were very receptive, as were a lot of the callers, and liked a lot of the items that were in the plan. Because the plan is not just about that one trail. It's about lots of things: safety, education, the environmental. So it's a comprehensive plan for the open space.
I guess if you can too, then just the relationship between the plan and the trail. The trail is definitely shown on a map in the plan, but because the plan is a series of recommendations, there's more process and approvals that would have to happen before that trail gets built. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, but we would go through an environmental process that we're doing now. As I mentioned, we're doing an environmental study of where the trail would go. So it's an operational trail, though. We build trails in our open space all the time. So this is just another opportunity to build a trail. But we will be going through more review for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So actually, let me just quickly add on to that then, Heather. So when people are the most efficient and the best way for people to have their voices heard is to go through the Pros Commission right now and to speak at the Pros meeting in April. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Silva.
Before Heather leaves, Heather, will the April 5th cover the issues that seem to be in question and may not, just clarification on where the primary access would be, where that trail would be located, where restroom facilities would be, et cetera?
Yes, we've been hearing their concerns, and we have I think some good answers for them, and we'll be clarifying that at the April meeting.
Yeah, and let me just add as well, if I could, Dan Buckshire, City Manager, that city staff have received inquiries from 10 to 15 residents, and responses to many of these concerns have been provided, and folks have been directed to participate at the Pros meeting. So that information has been shared regularly, and without going into too much discussion on this item because it's not on the agenda, the Trails Committee was created approximately 2 years ago, if not longer, and is comprised of members from all types of users who use the open space, whether it be hikers, bikers, equestrian, conservationists who would like to see preservation of natural resources. And those members have been working on ways to better manage and utilize the open space both in Lime Ridge and Shell Ridge. And so it's really about how to find a balance amongst all of those different interests. And as I think your council is aware, and probably many members of the community, usage of the open space has increased dramatically this past year. And certainly I would never consider a 2-year process to be hasty by any stretch. But the reason it was brought to PROS in December was to try to get this moving through a little more quickly, as opposed to vetting it for another 6 months or a year, because of the heavier usage, so that we can have better increased compatibility of usage, not only in Lime Ridge, but also in Shell Ridge, in order to better accommodate those that would like to really use the beautiful resources that we have here at Walnut Creek. So that's the overall intent of the plan. This flow trail is one very minor component of the overall package that's being considered by PROS, again, on April 5th.
May I ask one more question? And just to confirm, this is within the authority of the Park Recreation and Open Space Commission at an operational level, in the same way that there were questions about cattle versus goats back about 12 years ago in Acalanes Ridge open space.
That's correct.
Are there any other comments, questions of staff regarding public communications? I'll just make one last comment. We spoke a little bit earlier regarding the rebound committee. And again, I just want to reiterate, every single business has our heartfelt sympathy in this. If we had enough money to help all the businesses significantly, we absolutely would. We just frankly don't. And rather than have a few $100s go to 200 different businesses out there that wouldn't really make any difference whatsoever, other than perhaps keep things going for a day. The idea here was to really help these restaurants get to the point where they can open fully. It doesn't mean that we are marginalizing or diminishing the pain and suffering and closures that all these other businesses have had. That number upwards of 200 in the city. And if we were to have a windfall of millions of dollars that we could look at, I have no doubt we'd be talking about this. We just don't have it. And the best that we can hope for right now is to continue to keep the restaurants going on the footage that they are. We've already seen a number of our restaurants go under, as well as many other businesses, of course. And as soon as we are allowed to move into the red tier by the county, we are going to be right there helping get the businesses back up and running as quickly as we can. And so again, it's we hear you. We do not by any stretch of the imagination think that you have suffered any less than restaurants have. So with that, let's move on to council member and staff announcement reports or requests and activity. So we did not have any closed session announcements. Do we have any city manager reports?
Yeah, just briefly, Dan Buckshire, city manager, also serving as emergency services director, that we are still in a local state of emergency related to the pandemic. Thought I would provide a brief update with where things stand. As you're aware, we are still in the purple tier for the coding system created by the state. The latest information that I've seen, it's anticipated Contra Costa will remain in the purple tier for 1 to possibly 2 weeks. And then hopefully we would move to the red tier. Purportedly, there'll be more information coming from the state later this week about the tier system and the metrics that they're tracking to determine when various regions of the state would move into the various tiers. So there could be another update later this week that could change that status. So we'll wait and find out what happens. And then related to the vaccine, continued progress is being made. We are now for Contra Costa County, roughly 25% of residents have received the first dose and 11% have received the second dose. And in Walnut Creek, the numbers are considerably higher. We're at 40% for the first dose and approximately 20% for the second dose. So good progress being made. As we've stated before, it's the county's target to have 1 million doses administered by the 4th of July. For the county itself, they were targeting to have about 7,000 injections a day occurring. They've actually been exceeding that, closer to 10,000 a day, plus those provided by pharmacies, by the state, and by private healthcare providers. So it encouraged folks to go to cchealth.org and look to see if you are eligible to receive the vaccine. And if so, to look at the various options, as I mentioned, which include healthcare providers, the county, the state, as well as various pharmacies, including locally CVS, Safeway, and Rite Aid. And that's it this evening, Mayor.
Thank you, Dan. All right, let's move on to council member updates. And why don't we start with Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Thank you, Mayor. Along with Council Member Haskew, I attended the Finance Committee meeting on February 17th, where we received budget updates and updates on the long-term financial forecast that we'll also be hearing as a full council tonight on tonight's agenda. I attended the Recycle Smart Personnel Committee meetings, two of them, where we discussed the annual cost of living review and the performance evaluation for the executive director. With Councilmember Silva, I attended the Recycle Smart board meeting last week, where the focus of the discussion was on compliance with a law that was referenced earlier tonight, SB 1383, that requires a reduction in organic waste disposal by 2025, that 75% of the organic waste that was going into the black can now should be going into the green can, and the target is to achieve that by 2025. It also requires that certain food generators, restaurants and supermarkets in particular, recover the maximum amount of edible food that would otherwise be discarded so that that can go to people who need it. And it has a component that requires local agencies, including ours, to abide by organic waste product procurement requirements. And that essentially means that we'll have to purchase a certain amount of finished products derived from organic discards, things like compost, mulch, and recycled paper. And the Recycle Smart board staff will be in contact with our staff to talk about what those requirements are and the monitoring calculators and mechanisms that are available to us to see where we are now and where we need to be in a few short years. As a council liaison to Rossmore, I attended the Golden Rain Foundation board meeting last week. I provided an update on our city financial picture, the rebound program, the restaurant grant program, and our council priorities, both the current ones and the ones that we'll be talking about later this month. I heard about their emergency planning efforts. They were very thankful for the work our city manager has done in working with them, as well as the police and fire and county OES, to develop plans for emergency evacuations of Rossmore if that were to be needed in the case of wildfire or earthquake or other emergency. And they informed me about some of the plans they have in the future in that regard, and I was pleased to hear about that. Reporting back, the board members thanked the city and the council for our prudent fiscal management and also for allowing Tice Gym to be used as a COVID vaccination site. Then along with the mayor, I serve on the legislation committee, and along with the mayor and deputy city manager Carla Hansen, met with Assembly Member Tim Grayson to discuss our council legislative priorities related to the pandemic, mental health, and affordable housing. And that is my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Cindy Darling next.
Okay, so this, I was sworn in on the MCE board, which MCE is the energy provider that we are part of here in Walnut Creek, and it's a great effort, really. And I've got sworn in on the board. I've also been appointed to the executive committee, so I can start helping them work through some of their challenges. They did report out that with the current economic crisis, they are working with everybody that's their customer that's fallen behind on their bills, and making sure that they do targeted outreach to them to get them signed up to whatever program can help provide the relief that they're looking at. And they have a whole bunch of resources that they use to help people keep up with their bills. And then they talked about the cost this year for the green energy. Of course, their generation cost is going to continue to be lower than PG&E, but there's a little fee that gets put on top of it that goes to PG&E. And so they're working with the California Public Utilities Commission to make sure that we right size that PG&E fee, so it continues to be not only a green source of energy, but a very affordable source. So that's my thing there. And this is not quite a council thing, but Community Service Day, led by Cindy Silva, will be coming up in April, and I'll let her talk about that part. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to Councilmember Haskew.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I attended the Contra Costa Transportation Authority meeting, and during our main topics, we talked about, we were presented with the staff's recommendation for allocating their revised budget numbers. Contra Costa Transportation Authority works under Measure A and J, and we have to forecast when those measures will no longer be in existence, and make sure we have enough money to meet those standards to accomplish those things that we have. And so we talked about the standards, about how we prioritize the projects that we're going to go forward, largely focusing on the ones that are the most shovel ready and the ones that are most likely to get outside funds over and above any of the sales tax funds. For those bikers who are waiting for the bike across the McCauley Trail, it's not that easy. It's very difficult. There are many, many reasons why that's not going to happen real soon, but the serious design work has started. And the last item is we're starting to plan and design the Innovate 680 projects. And most dear to my heart is the fact that we approved that one of the projects be the autonomous vehicles for Rossmore for the first and last mile. And I'm really excited that that's going to be one of Contra Costa Transportation's initial, gosh, and I'm so excited I can hardly find the words, initial projects. I also attended, and I believe the whole council did, if they couldn't be there in person, certainly in spirit, Chief Jay Hill's walkout. He has served our community for, gosh, more years than many, and he did it well. So it was a nice ceremony, and thank him yet again for his service to our community.
Thanks, Luella. I want to hear more about that first mile, last mile program that's with autonomous vehicles. Wow, we'll have to talk offline on that one.
You got it.
That sounds great. And Councilmember Silva.
Thank you very much. It has been a busy couple of weeks, hasn't it? First, I would add on to the Mayor Pro Tem's report about what's happening at Recycle Smart. I will mention that SB 1383 is the most stringent recycling related legislation that has come through the state of California, probably since the first bill was adopted 30 years ago. And Recycle Smart will be handling the implementation of all of our requirements to meet the guidelines of SB 1383 for the 6 agencies that participate in Recycle Smart, which is relief, but it's not a de minimis amount of work. In fact, it's significant, and we will, our staff at Recycle Smart will be working hard on that. Also, at our last meeting, the board received the report from the city of Walnut Creek requesting the use of $650,000 of our reserve funds from the sale of recyclable materials. And we will be using the city, we will be using those funds most significantly, about a third of them, for roofing material on the Shadelands Arts Center, the gardens at Heather Farm, and other facilities around the city. So we use the funds to buy materials that are made of 70% or greater recycled content. So that's very exciting. And there will be some other projects that those funds support. The Chamber of Commerce Board met a couple of weeks ago, and Dan Buckshay was there, and Dan Buckshay and I were there. And we heard that they are almost finalizing the selection of the new president and CEO. I thought they were finalizing it last Friday, but I haven't heard if they've made the announcement. I don't believe they have, so stay tuned on that. Assistant City Manager Terry Kilgore and I participated in the Convention and Visitors Bureau kickoff of their rebranding effort. The city manager was with us at that event as well. And I think what's exciting about it is they're really looking with a consultant that does that kind of hospitality industry marketing, how to really market not just the hotels, but the destination, because people come here not just to stay, but they come here for specific purposes, whether it's to work or be part, enjoy the entertainment or the restaurants or whatever else is going on in Walnut Creek. So that's very exciting, and looking forward to the results of that. The Rebound Committee, when it met last week, which the mayor is part of that with me, we not only talked about the grant program for the restaurants, but we discussed how with the Contra Costa Fire Agency, that we've got some clarity and some loosening of the requirements for outdoor dining, which is very helpful, while the restaurants wait to be able to move back inside. So that our staff is working very hard with all of the restaurateurs and other businesses about how they can reopen safely, and really a big shout out to staff for that work. It has been very, very intensive. Councilmember Darling mentioned Community Service Day. Yes, it's not just happening in October. On April 17th, we will be doing another food drive. It will have a number of different elements, so stay tuned. You can get more information at walnut-creek.org/service, but it will also be in this upcoming issue of the Nutshell, which should be in people's hands in the next few weeks. Many of you know that the city of Walnut Creek is a member of the National League of Cities, which is the national organization similar to the League of California Cities. Next week would ordinarily be when we go to Washington, D.C. to basically not only have a conference, but also to go on the Hill and advocate for what we're looking for with our congressional representatives. Well, we'll be doing it via Zoom. It is $140 per person. There are some great conference activities that are on the docket. It starts on Sunday, March 7th. It continues through Tuesday, March 9th, and then also the virtual Hill Day is on March 10th. So you still can sign up for that. There are a number of sessions on racial equity. There are a number of sessions on COVID, and Anthony Fauci will be speaking. There are some sessions also on broadband, and there's a session with the Western Municipal Association. So I encourage you to participate. It is well worth the time, and also allows you to hear, when you participate in those sessions, what's happening at other states and what other issues are happening in that arena. And then I will finally, two things. One is that the Advancing Equity Committee that I am serving on for Cal Cities has had one meeting and meets again tomorrow. And there is a lot of excellent work that will be happening with that. And I noticed that an attorney from Myers-Nave, who works for the city of Pinole, I think if I saw that, is also serving on that committee. So I look forward to being able to work with him. And finally, I will mention, I'm going to circle back to the city manager's report on the COVID vaccination process that's happening in the county. A big shout out to Contra Costa County. It is doing probably the best in the state in terms of reaching the 65 and older age population. And one of the reasons is because there has been a full-scale effort by nonprofit partners across the county to really reach into those homes where our seniors are. And Choice in Aging in particular, which is located in Pleasant Hill, has been going literally to the 6-bed, 8-bed, 4-bed board and care facilities that are typically family owned and operated, and not only taking the vaccine in and taking care of those homes, not only for the residents, but also the healthcare workers that are working there. And it has made a significant difference. And today I saw an email in which the Los Angeles Times and ABC News are giving a big shout out to what the work of Choice in Aging. And finally, I will mention that I've had both of my shots and I haven't died from getting a vaccine. So, but I'm still wearing my mask and I'm still staying socially distant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cindy. Well, I suppose the only other topic that's getting as much play right now as when can I get vaccinated are schools and when are they reopening. On that topic, I met with the school board president, Sharice Cound, and the superintendent, Dr. Adam Clark of Mount Diablo School District last week, along with 3 other local mayors from Clayton, Concord, and Pleasant Hill to talk about what's happening, how they're looking to bring students back. And essentially what they're looking to do is have a hybrid model that'll be starting within the next couple of weeks on a K through 8 basis. And they're still working out the specifics behind there. The biggest problem that they have, as they described it, is just the fact that the classrooms cannot hold the amount of students that they have there. So they're looking at morning or afternoon and figuring out a hybrid in that. That's the biggest problem, though, is just the space itself. They did tell me that they are striving to come back fully in the fall. They're going to be following state guidance, but they are hoping and pushing for 100% capacity come the fall. But anybody that's in the Mount Diablo School District, I'm sure, is receiving frequent updates on exactly how this will work for the remainder of this school year. For those in the Walnut Creek School District, they're already seeing, of course, the fact that K through 5 is open for hybrid right now, and that 6th through 8th will be opening once the red tier, once we're in the red tier, will be open for hybrid. They're still going to be following state guidelines for the fall, but they're expecting to be open for then. And the Acalane School District, which of course Las Lomas is in, is also expected to start with a hybrid model once we're in the red tier. They're anticipating March 16th. So that's the update there. Obviously, the school board meetings are long. They're extensive. I would encourage anybody to get the newsletters that the boards put out. I believe they come out every week to keep everybody completely informed on that. As Cindy mentioned, we have the rebound committee. The nice thing about that ad hoc committee is that when there are issues that we need to address quickly, we can do it. We don't have to wait for a whole cycle in the next month. And that showed with us being able to expand the grant program. And I'm happy we were able to do that right now. We did hear a little bit regarding the retirement for Chief Jay Hill. I do want to say that when I spoke and gave my remarks, and it was a wonderful ceremony to be able to bid a farewell to Jay Hill, who's been with the police department for 25 years, all with Walnut Creek Police Department. It was the first time I have spoken at an event with live people in a year. So it was a milestone. I wasn't sure if I should be happy or sad about that, but I look for many more to come in the weeks ahead. And then lastly, I want to mention that this just came out on the city website. I touched on it when I spoke at the December meeting. The Walnut Creek Heroes site is now open on the city page. And this is to nominate a resident or somebody that we feel has really gone above and beyond and helping someone else. This might be a teacher, it might be a frontline worker, could be somebody in a hospital, it could be a grocery store person that's just there every day with a smile on their face. Together, let's uplift those stories that often fall under the radar and shine a light on the everyday heroes among us who have gone above and beyond. Nominations for January and February are due by this Friday, March 5th, so don't delay. So that brings us to the end of our comments. Let me see, would anybody like a 5 to 10 minute break? Raise your hand. I see one. That's good enough for me. All right. It's 7:35. Let's rejoin at 7:45 and then we will continue with the agenda then. All right, welcome back. Next on the agenda is a consideration item titled Fiscal Year 2021 Second Quarter Budget. So at this time, I'll invite the staff to provide the staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Wilk and Mayor Pro Tem Francois and members of the council. Kirsten Lacasse, Administrative Services Director. I'm going to share my screen and begin our presentation. So tonight I'm going to walk you through our fiscal year 2021 second quarter revenue and expenditure update. So first, I want to talk about what has changed since the budget was adopted and how that's impacting our economic outlook. And then I will talk about the fiscal year 2021 general fund, parking fund, and Boundary Oak Golf Course Fund second quarter results. And then we will touch on the next steps. So one thing that we know for sure that has remained consistent throughout the pandemic is the uncertainty. So when we adopted the budget back in July for fiscal year 21, we assumed that schools would reopen in person in the fall. No additional state or federal support would be provided. There would be no major COVID-19 medical breakthrough, and we would have a prolonged economic recovery from the fiscal year 20 recession. So when we came to you with our first quarter update, not all of these assumptions held. And so the school districts were then discussing possibly returning to in-person learning in January of 2021. We still had our prolonged economic recovery, but there was unpredictable consumer behavior that affected some of our revenue streams. And now that we're at our second quarter update, what we're seeing is that school districts are still uncertain regarding the in-person learning. And again, this is as of second quarter, so some of this is changing and things will hopefully be getting better in March. And then we had a second COVID relief package that was passed in December of 2020. We had 2 COVID vaccines approved and distribution is well underway. And then we had a third COVID vaccination approved in less than a week ago. And so over the last 6 months, we have moved between 6 of the state's tiers in their blueprint for a safer economy. So we were in purple back in August of 2020. We've gone through other tiers. We were in a deep purple, shelter in place during the holiday season, and now we're back in purple. And so this stop and start pace of the economic recovery has added to the already uncertain recovery. So first I want to talk about the general fund, and the headlines here are that we're doing better than we anticipated when we adopted our fiscal year 21 budget. And that's as a result of sales tax revenue projections are increasing, and we have some projected expenditure savings as well. And as a result of the results, we anticipate using less reserves than were authorized in our fiscal year 21 budget. So at the summary level, you'll see in the first column, our fiscal year 21 budget was 77 million in revenue and expenditures of 79.3 million. And then we had the authorized use of reserves of 2.3 million to close that budget gap. So when we looked at our Q2 projections, what we're seeing is an increase in our revenues to 78.2 million. So that's 1.2 million higher than we budgeted. And on the expenditure side, we're looking at projections of about 78.5 million. And that results in a savings of approximately 800,000. So based on that, we're anticipating to need only about 300,000 at year end from our authorized reserves. So we look at our revenues in two buckets. We look at our general revenues and our department revenues. So overall, the general revenues are projected to come in about 2.7 million higher than budgeted. And it's a result of the property tax, which is increasing by just over 400,000 based on an updated assessed value from the county. Additionally, our sales tax is projected to come in at 2.78 higher than our budget. And that's a result of an increase in online sales. So if you look at the fourth quarter of fiscal year 20, which was from April through June, and compare that to the first quarter of this current fiscal year, you'll see a 37% increase in online sales. And additionally, the transportation and construction sectors are maintaining, they're doing well, relatively speaking. And so overall, the general revenue is projected to come in at about 2.7 million higher. When we look at our department revenues, we're projecting that we will come in just about 1.4 million lower than budgeted. And there are a couple of things driving this. In community development, we're seeing a reduction in revenues projected about just over 600,000. And that's a result of 4 projects that were targeted for fiscal year 21 that have been pushed into fiscal year 22, as well as other pandemic related impacts on development. In arts and recreation, we're projecting about a $910,000 revenue loss. And this is a combination of the delayed reopening of Lesher and Center Rep, as well as the use of the Tice Valley Gym for the vaccine clinic in place of other programming that generates revenues. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind here with arts and recreation. There will be corresponding expenditure savings related to the delayed reopenings, as well as potential reimbursement from FEMA for the lost revenue from the vaccine clinic. However, that would not be received in the current fiscal year. And so overall, in the general fund, our total revenues are projected at about 1.25 million higher than our budget. So when we're looking at our expenditure projections, we're taking a conservative approach, in part due to the continued uncertainty that I talked about a little bit earlier. So the 800,000 roughly savings you see in the salary and benefits category, that's based on vacancy savings for months July through December. So we've already achieved these savings. These are not projected savings. So again, we're being conservative. And so overall, we're looking at expenditure savings at year end of about 800,000. And there may be more savings on the expenditure side by year end, but we'll have better, more refined projections for you at Q3 once we have more data. So next I want to talk about the parking fund. The parking fund has significant revenue loss and compared to the adopted budget. And while there may be a need to use reserves, it's unlikely that the general fund will need to provide any support. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So as of the second quarter, the parking fund has received only 18% of the revenues at 50% of the year. So based on this, we're projecting approximately 3.36 million at year end, which falls short of our budget by over $4 million. And this is due in part to not collecting revenue from more than 2/3 of our on-street parking meters. So the expenditures at the second quarter are at 39% of budget, and that's basically due to vacancies, as well as limiting spending to essential transactions, and then also a lower transaction volume related to the parking meters. So as a result, we're projecting just over 600,000 in savings at year end on the expenditure side. So these savings will help offset the revenue loss, but our projected deficit is 3.2 million. And staff will continue with these cost saving measures by not filling vacancies and still limiting non-essential expenditures. So next I want to cover some of the potential solutions that could be used to mitigate this projected $3.2 million deficit in the parking fund. So as you recall, we received about $875,000 from the CARES Act funding in the current fiscal year to offset costs associated with public safety response to COVID. So these funds can be used to defray the public safety costs in the parking fund. Additionally, over time, the parking fund has accumulated available fund balance of approximately 2.5 million, which could also be used to help mitigate the deficit at year end. There are approximately 1.1 million in reserves, and that's the capital reserve and the emergency reserve combined. So that is also something that we would have available. The use of the CARES Act funding and the available fund balance should result in the parking fund closing the year without needing support from the general fund, but again, we may have to dip into those reserves. So next I will touch briefly on the Boundary Oak Golf Course Fund. So this fund, since the golf course reopened in May of 2020, they've seen record demand for golf. So our revenues are up slightly, and we are projecting that we will stay within budget for both revenues and expenditures at year end. So the revenue budget at Boundary Oak is just over 4 million. And as of Q2, receipts are trending slightly higher at 57% of the budget, and expenditures are roughly 47% at Q2. So we're projecting overall that the fund will be within budget at year end. So in summary, we're doing better than we anticipated in the general fund, again, as a result of increased sales tax revenue projections, as well as expenditure savings. And so that will require less use of reserves at year end. Parking fund, we have significant revenue loss, but we do have some solutions we've identified that will help mitigate the deficit, and general fund support will likely not be needed. Boundary Oak Golf Course is doing well with their record demand, and we're projecting to end the year at budget. So for our next steps, we're going to continue monitoring the budget, and keeping in mind the ongoing uncertainty, we'll keep a conservative approach. And we'll be back to you in May of 2021 with the third quarter update as we have more data available. So what we're asking of you this evening is to accept the report as recommended by the Finance Committee, and we're not planning on making any budget adjustments at this time. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. All right, terrific. Well, let's start with any council questions. Raise your hand if you have questions here. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and to Katie, your budget manager, and all of your staff for the number of times you've had to recalculate how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, I think. Couple of questions. The sales tax results that you're reporting in the general fund for, it's not just for quarter two, it's for the first half of the year, just in case someone out in the audience thinks it's only the second quarter. It's the first and second quarters combined. Do those numbers reflect actual proceeds or receipts for sales tax during the month of December, the local sales tax, or are those monies still only an estimate?
Those are still only an estimate. So we should have that information in the next few weeks. And so we'll bring that back to you with the third quarter.
Okay. The you mentioned in your report that our salaries and benefits, you're already projecting a savings of $800,000, but does that reflect the change we made this evening? Or will that number get actually smaller because of the amendments we made to our agreements with our employees tonight?
That number does not reflect that action. So this is what we have accumulated in savings through the end of December. So yes, there could be some offsetting. What we're hoping is there'll be additional savings by year end, but yes, we would need to take that into consideration.
And then 2 questions about the parking fund. First of all, the $875,000 that we're projecting is available from either the first or the second or both of the CARES Acts. Those funds are actually still available and can be used for public safety purposes, if I'm understanding you correctly. Does
Yes,
that
that's correct.
reflect the change in which 100% can be now used, or however that rule change came about?
Well, the CARES Act had a specific allotment for our city. So it was the 875,000. This was the first round of the CARES Act money. FEMA is actually changing their reimbursement. They were at 75%, and so they've changed that to 100%. So that's actually separate, but that is also available.
And then this doesn't reflect any assumption about what the current COVID relief package that is working its way through Congress may or may not produce for us.
That's correct.
And then regarding the fund balance, those are not reserves under our rules for how much we keep in reserve for the parking fund. That is truly undesignated fund balance.
Yes, that is correct.
All right.
It's separate from the reserves.
Thank you very much for the clarifications. Thank you, Mayor.
Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Darling.
I just had a quick question. I forgot about this one when I was talking to you earlier today, Kirsten. Thanks for all the numbers. I'm still, as the new council member, trying to wrap my head around them all. I remember at the end of, as if this year's budget was being adopted, you guys did a little shuffle on library hours, but I don't remember exactly what you did. Have we heard anything from the library about reopening? And is that question going to come back to us?
I can speak to that one if you'd like, council member. Actually, just heard from our new head librarian at the county, Allison McKee. She's going to be setting up a meeting with us in the next couple of weeks to talk about their reopening plans, what they'll look like. Obviously, they're tracking the tiers closely in order to see when they might be able to open. What I anticipate is they will have an incremental approach, most like every other business, that when the time comes to open, it would be limited to book pickup and drop off, possibly some computer use, but no lingering beyond that to read or do some of the other types of activities. And then as we progress through the COVID tiers, they'd be able to open up beyond that. So have a better update towards the end of the month of where they stand. And then related to the budget, and I'll defer to Kirsten if I state this incorrectly, we chose not to fund any of the additional open hours based upon the COVID condition at the time, which was effectively a $500,000 savings, which candidly proved to be one of the wisest decisions I think council made during the budget. Because I can assure you the other cities that are paying for additional open hours, which means there's just more time for people to come pick up books remotely, they're not really pleased that they're spending that money. So, you know, I'm not hearing that there's a backlog of people waiting in line to pick up or drop off their books through the outside setup is there. So effectively, there was zero impact on services as a result of reducing those open hours because the library would not have been open anyway. That said, I suspect for the coming year's budget, we'll be having plenty of policy discussion about libraries and where to proceed, but more on that to follow in the coming months.
Okay, and then my other question has to do with FEMA reimbursement. You say that won't come until next year because it just takes a while to get through it. Will it be just for Tice Gym or also for other city activities related to COVID? Do we have a sense yet of what FEMA is likely to reimburse us for?
They are going to reimburse us for some of the costs associated with COVID, and if I remember correctly, it's mostly around the PPE. But the comment about we wouldn't get that in this fiscal year for Tice is generally because it takes a long time to get reimbursed.
Okay, thanks. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. And again, thank you for the report. I know that the city receives less of a percentage of sales tax revenue if something is purchased online versus in store. What's the current reduction in sales tax percentage of revenues that Walnut Creek receives if it is an online purchase? It used to be like, I thought it was 1/8 of the amount that we normally would get.
I can speak to that if you'd like. So for every dollar that would have been purchased in a brick and mortar that is shifted to online, we lose 83 cents on the dollar. So we retain about 17% of that. So obviously it's a huge concern about that shift being exacerbated with the pandemic. That said, in the near term, what we're seeing because of the Supreme Court decision with Wayfair and I think it was South Dakota, one of the Dakotas back a year or two ago, that effectively all sales out of state that are on, there's some exclusions, but effectively all sales on the internet are now taxable. Whereas before there were many sales that were exempted. So we're seeing that increase that for now, I'm trying to get my hands in the screen here, that increase is outpacing the drop in the amount of money we would be receiving proportionally from brick and mortar. And that's part of the reason we're seeing this uptick. That said, over time, this is a trend that is concerning. I actually raised this at our statewide city managers department meeting through the league, that I think this is something that cities are going to have to tackle at some point, because effectively, and I'm rounding here a bit, but there are about 10% of cities statewide that benefit from this arrangement because they have distribution centers, and it comes at the expense of the other 90% of cities, which obviously there are some serious equity concerns with that current arrangement. So that will be a hot topic. Tax reform is never easy, and nor would this, but that's the lay of the land for right now. So that's a really long answer. I'll bookend it with, we lose 83 cents on the dollar for every.
I appreciate it. I knew that is significant. I know that State Senator Steve Glazer has been behind trying to reform that as well. And obviously we are heavy in sales tax revenue as a city and have to be concerned about that as we look forward. I had a couple of questions about the parking itself. And this is going to be one of those questions that bridge between the way things are now and how we're going to be looking toward the future of how outdoor dining even works. But do we know offhand what the total number of spaces that are currently taken up by outdoor dining?
So I would ask that Susie, if you could bring Carla in so she could help with these questions. My understanding though right now is that it's 125, but I will defer to Carla since she's our expert.
That number is stuck in my head too, but I wanted to be sure. Hi, Carla.
Hi, good to see you all this evening. Carla Hansen, Deputy City Manager. I heard the last bit of that question, Mayor. Do we know how many spaces are being taken up by outdoor dining? Is that correct?
So, and I'll actually expand upon that. How many spaces are taken up by outdoor dining? How many are taken up by curbside pickup? And now those actually have polls. We'll stop there. They have one other question, but we'll stop right there.
So currently, in total, we have about 97 that are being taken up by outdoor dining. We call them pop-ups, outdoor dining. About 50 curbside pickup and about 15 just due to street closure.
Okay. And on the ones that are curbside pickup, though, we still charge for those.
We do not charge for those.
We're not. Okay. All right. Oh. I wonder if I put money in one of those. And then on the, so do we have what the amount of the total revenue shortfall is from us not charging due to outdoor dining over the course of the time that we've actually been charging for it?
Yeah, so we're looking at about $250,000 in revenue loss just for July through December
Okay.
This year,
All right.
fiscal year 21.
All right. So obviously this is something we'd have to take into consideration moving forward into looking at the rest of the year's budget.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you so much.
If I could, Mayor, brief, I just want to add to that. We are targeting, it's either for the end of April or early May, to provide an update related to the rebound program, where things stand, and then bring some key policy decisions to your council regarding what might we want to do on a longer term or potentially even a permanent basis. Any changes to how we're managing parking with respect to what would be allowed in the right of way, not only downtown, but in other areas of the city. And so we will have updated data and information around lost revenue and effectively the costs and trade-offs with some of those programs for the council's consideration at that time.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, there obviously are costs and trade-offs here that probably a lot of people haven't been thinking about. All right. Well, if there are no more questions from council, let's open it up to see if we have any question or, oh, we do. Oh, now the hands go up. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
I told you my timing was off tonight. Thank you again, Mayor. On the revenue, and thank you staff for the great work and the reports. On the revenue projections for parking, can you confirm that our assumptions were status quo? No, for the rest of the fiscal year, no charging at the purple poles, continued charging at the parking garages, and no charging at the green poles for outdoor dining. Is that what we assumed?
That's correct, yes.
And the total number of green poles is something 125 for outdoor dining, 50 for curbside pickup, and 15 for something else. I missed that.
So I think outdoor dining, we've projected 125 for just outdoor dining. Curbside pickup has ebbed and flowed over the last 6 months and will probably continue through the rest of the fiscal year, just because it's really based on need. When we went into the deep purple tier in December, when no outdoor dining was allowed, we increased those spaces to 50 just because we knew restaurants would probably need them more at that time. And we're currently looking at that now. We're seeing the demand for those spaces go up. People are staying longer than 15 minutes. So we're looking at changing that a little bit just to reflect demand and what folks actually need for parking downtown.
And this is a real technical nitpicky question, but I know we started charging again at the parking garages in mid-November. Do we know how much revenue we gathered between mid-November and the end of December?
We do. Not a nitpicky question at all. It was about $75,000 with 2 weeks of revenue in November and then the full month of December. And again, as we all know, we're in the deep purple, so demand was pretty low.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Haskew. No?
No, I got to ask my questions at Finance Committee, so
That's what I thought.
yeah.
Great. So now let's open it up to the public and see if there's any comments the public would like to make. Do we have any members of the public, Susie?
I do not see any hands raised for public comment.
Okay, well, we'll bring it back to council for any final comments. And why don't we start with the committee? Did you have another?
Another question since Carla is with us. Now that you're seeing what the parking garages were generating in revenues, do you have a sense of what the usage is January and February now that we are progressing out of the from deep purple to red or purple, I guess, et cetera?
We do. So January was fairly slow. We were at about 35% occupancy, but we're seeing in February about 50. So it is climbing. And as we're seeing the county tiers having more things open, more people are able to come to work, more people are able to come downtown and shop and dine. So we're seeing parking demand increase each week.
So while we're not going to be able to replace the dollar volume because the on-street parking is more expensive than the garage parking, we might be seeing the volume that would be on the street rather than, okay, thank you.
Okay, now we'll go around the horn here. We'll start with the Finance Committee. Mayor Pro Tem Francois, if you have any final comments.
I just want to thank again our staff, our city manager, our budget director, our finance director. I'm very proud of all the hard, and there were hard decisions that we had to make over the last 9 months, 12 months in both budget cycles, but I think they're putting us in good stead. And in addition to that, all the prudent fiscal management that's gone on in this city for decades is, I think, a real testament that we seem to be weathering this storm relatively well, knock on wood, and that I'm concerned about the parking fund, as I think we all are, and I'd like to keep a close eye on that and make sure that we're taking prudent actions in regard to that as well. And I think some of the budget reductions that we made last year that are permanent in nature, I think one of my colleagues asked the question, kind of what is having the greatest impact on the budget picture, and that was one of them. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the hard decisions we and all the staff had to make on that, and we'll continue on and do the hard work here.
Thank you. Councilmember Haskew.
Yeah, I duplicate and exclamation point what the Mayor Pro Tem said, that the city staff has really, really held us together. I think we've all learned to have a great deal of faith in their judgment and their understanding of the fiscal outcomes of what choices are, which help us make better choices. So, they aren't just crunching numbers, they're thinking about what's going on, and that's invaluable. I really appreciate the fact that we are in a place where we're getting good news. You just kind of have to think, even though we had an unexpected going back to Deep Purple, we're still kind of in the good news such situation. And yet again, thank the staff for making concessions when we asked them to make concessions, and thank them. And I hope they understand that we appreciated them so much. We made the adjustments as a result of that. So ultimately, I think I'm going to recommend that we accept, as one of the two representatives on the finance, that we accept the report as presented. And I'm finished.
Councilmember Darling.
As my fellow council members have said, thank you to the staff for the work that you guys have done in pulling this all together and making cuts at a fairly deep level, because it's always easier to say, oh, we're doing a little better than we thought we were, than to have to go back in and cut more. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the four of you that were on council for passing this budget while I was just watching from the participants, so that we could get to this point that we're fiscally sound, we're moving forward, and I support this. And I'm glad that we're in a healthy, reasonably healthy position, because there's a lot of work that's going to be coming as we're coming out of COVID to help our city as a whole. And I look forward to that.
Thank you. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Mayor. I would again thank staff for all of the work on this and the work you've been doing across all the departments. It's not just the finance department. It takes every department to figure out where to cut and where to scrimp and save in order to have, stay afloat during just horrific times such as we are having. I would concur with the other Cindy that if there is light at the end of our tunnel, it may be that we're going to need to dig a little deeper to help the community at large through this economic recovery and the health recovery that across the community. We have people out of work, and it's going to, that food insecurity and all of that is going to continue for a while. So we are in a better position to be able to help them. So thank you.
And again, thank you to staff. It was just about a year ago today or tomorrow that Councilmember Silva and I were on the Finance Committee, and we were being told that we have a $3 million surplus so far, and did we want to allocate it anywhere? And we said, you know, this thing, COVID going around, maybe just hang on to it and see how things go. And of course, we went off the cataclysmic cliff just a couple weeks after that. And as we were biting our fingernails, the quick wondering, how in the world are we going to be able to make a budget? How are we going to make these cuts? And as we know, went from a $3 million surplus to a $13 million deficit, looking at just catastrophic cuts for the next fiscal year as well. And the guidance that the finance, the staff on finance, so Kirsten and Katie, and led by Dan, thank you for putting us in a position that, frankly, we have cities that are our neighbors that are desperately trying to figure out how they are going to make ends meet and keep things running efficiently for the next 6 months to a year. And we are doing much better than that, certainly. And we're at a spot where we can see the light. We know we have to make some hard decisions. But as we saw going into the final months of last year, I'm talking about the calendar year, there was a lot of pressure on council to make cuts in certain departments, whether it was arts or police or public works, all coming from all directions. And the guidance that we got, I believe we made the right decisions to get us to the point now where we can look, how do we then grow from this point? So again, thank you for that. And thank you to Luella and Matt for being on the Finance Committee now and going from here. So with that, I believe we need a motion. Luella, you were making that motion.
It's, yeah, they recommend, it's a recommendation that we accept the report. So I move that we do that.
I'll second that motion.
All right. And Madam City Clerk, would you please read the roll?
Councilmember Haskew.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Aye.
Councilmember Darling.
Aye.
Councilmember Silva.
Aye.
And Mayor Wilk.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. All right. So for our final item, we have the 10-year financial forecast update. And we'll ask staff to provide the presentation on that.
Good evening, Mayor Wilk, Mayor Pro Tem Francois, and council members. I'm Katie Bruner, Budget Manager, and I'm having, here we go. And I will be presenting an update to the 10-year financial forecast this evening. So in 2019, just for some background, staff introduced a new forecasting model, which increased the sophistication, a level of sophistication from our previous forecasting tools. We've taken this model and have updated it with actual financial results from fiscal year 19, fiscal year 20, our fiscal year 21 adopted budget, and then also the information presented just previously from the fiscal year 21 second quarter update. So this evening, we're asking that council accept the report updating the 10-year financial forecast as recommended by the Finance Committee. A slight change from previous years, we are not asking council to adopt a specific forecast scenario this evening. Before I dive into the forecast, I do want to touch just briefly on the current status of the pension trust and previous council policies regarding the use of the trust. So the pension trust was established in February 2018. And then in May 2019, City Council was presented with options for use of the trust, and the following direction was provided. The use of the trust should be delayed until fiscal year 2023, with the goal of the trust balance to attain around $25 million before use, if possible. The default use of the trust, kind of when we look at using the trust, would be to offset any 2/3 of a projected shortfall, but that assumption of how we use the trust would be revisited every budget cycle. And then just for a point of reference, at the end of February, so just a few weeks ago, the current balance in our pension trust is about $25.5 million. So the forecast that I'm about to present is for the city's general fund, and all scenarios presented this evening will include the following assumptions. We assume a 7-year moderate recession cycle, which is defined as an 18-month decline, followed by a 3-year recovery period. The current recession began in fiscal year 2020, as we've all lived through these exciting times. And so the next recession is modeled to begin in fiscal year 27. On average, in general, there's a 2.7% cost inflator applied, and this is based on the 10-year average Bay Area Consumer Price Index. All scenario charts are our net operating results after required contributions to reserves. And in years where there is a projected deficit shown, there are no budget balancing actions applied. And this includes the use of reserves or the pension trust. And then last, staff are in the process of developing our fiscal year 22 and 23 budget. The city is statutorily required to adopt a balanced budget. And we know the budget will differ from the forecast just as we get into the nuance of our detailed revenue projections and our projected operating needs. So next, I'll go a little deeper into our specific revenue assumptions and general trends. So our property tax, our assessed value, will grow at 1% in fiscal year 22. And this is based on current information from the Board of Equalization. But then we will continue a 2% inflator on assessed value in fiscal year 23 and beyond. For sales tax, we have 2 scenarios presented based on forecasts from the city's sales tax consultant. These forecasts are based on results from July through September 2020. And we have the most likely sales tax forecast and the conservative sales tax forecast that will be presented. Our transient occupancy tax and arts and recreation revenues will fully recover to pre-pandemic levels by fiscal year 2025. And then on average, other revenues will grow that 2.7% Bay Area CPI average. So this chart here shows the general revenue trends. It has some history there, but also out through the next 20 years. The dips in the revenue trends are related to forecasted recessions. And so the model also includes the forecast includes the following assumptions regarding our expenditures. So for personnel, we've incorporated current cost increases per adopted MOUs, memorandums of understandings, and then we apply our CPI 2.7% thereafter. One-time reductions, such as employee furloughs and employee concessions, were restored in fiscal year 22. And then there is a 4% growth on medical costs. Regarding pension costs, we assume a discount rate reaches 6% over 20 years. So that's a phased in cost increase. Our operating and maintenance costs include the restoration of one-time budget reductions in fiscal year 22, as well as any one-time budget additions are removed from fiscal year 22. In most of the scenarios, the extra library hours are not restored. And as the city manager mentioned earlier this evening, that will be a policy discussion as part of this upcoming budget development cycle. And then again, on average, a 2.7% growth on operating and maintenance expenses. And our capital contributions are set at 2% of our forecasted general fund revenues per current policy. And so this shows our expenditure trends over time, and rising pension costs are a significant factor of the increasing costs. So based on the assumptions I just described, we have quite a few scenarios this evening to go into. So the scenarios on this slide show the most likely sales tax assumption with the addition of one full-time equivalent employee annually in scenario 1A, and holding staffing levels constant, flat, as they currently exist in scenario 1B. These scenarios show a deficit in fiscal year 22 due to continued impacts from the pandemic, but forecast surpluses in fiscal year 23 until the next modeled recession. And I'd like to point out that the ongoing cuts made to balance fiscal year 21, which included eliminating about 10 full-time equivalent positions, and about half of which were ongoing, are a significant factor to the improved outlook of this forecast. That being said, the combination of lower revenues due to the modeled recession and increased pension costs do lead to projected deficits in the out years. So the next set of scenarios demonstrate the forecast should we use a conservative sales tax assumption. Using the conservative sales tax forecast could pronounce the recession impacts on sales tax revenues in the out years. And again, we have the two scenarios, one with adding a new staff person every year and holding staffing levels flat. This next scenario is if we were to look at, for an example, restoring the library hours. So this builds upon scenario 1A, which is the most likely sales tax assumption and assumes a staff person is added FTE annually. So that is the extra library hours that were reduced in fiscal year 21 is about $560,000 a year. And so this scenario demonstrates the impact of ongoing costs in the forecast, which reduce forecasted surpluses and increase forecasted deficits. And then lastly, this is a hybrid scenario, which is if we were to just add half, instead of either one FTE or no FTE, if we were to add a half FTE annually. So I have two scenarios on this slide. Scenario 3A is just using the most likely sales tax assumption, and if we add that half of a staff annually. And then 3B is the half FTE annually, and if the funding for the extra library hours was fully restored. Again, the overall trend is the same, is in line with the previous scenarios. And the addition of ongoing costs has a continued effect in the out years of the model. So the key points this evening is that the updated forecast shows a much improved outlook compared to what was adopted in 2019, in part to the $9.1 million in budget cuts that we made to balance fiscal year 21. Based on the most recent data available, we feel that somewhere between scenario 1A and 1B with the most likely sales tax forecast is the most likely scenario. And that also allows for the strategic addition of staff in order to meet service demands. Despite the more positive outlook, we are facing rising pension costs and future recession impacts, which do project deficits in the out years. And then last, the forecast is not a budget. Our operating deficits and surpluses will differ from when we bring budgets to council for adoption and their policy discussions. While the forecast identifies the long-term, the trends, and it's a powerful tool, there are a lot of assumptions driving this forecast. The budget process is where we get into the nitty gritty of what we think the next 2 years are going to look like, what our spending plan is, what our operational needs, and what our revenues are going to look like. So balancing strategies in future years will be brought forward for council direction, including the use of the pension trust. But overall, the forecast demonstrates the trends we anticipate to see over the next 5 to 10 years. So again, tonight we are asking council to accept the report updating the financial forecast as recommended by the Finance Committee. And with that, I am available for questions.
Thank you, Katie. All right, let's see if we've got any questions on the council. I see you, Cindy. I just want to see if somebody else wants to go first for once.
I agree with you.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well then.
Let's make it right. No, wait. No, that's an old. that shows my age. Thank you very much, Kirsten, Katie, and all of the finance staff and the Finance Committee for going through this. Katie, I'm hoping you can answer a few questions, please.
Of course.
One of the assumptions that's been embedded in this model is that there's like an 18-month recovery when a recession starts. So now we've had one that started March 17th, literally, of last year. Does the model reflect 18 months still to come out of this current recession, which would put us somewhere in about September of 2020, you know?
So the model takes into account the current impacts of the current recession, and we have tweaked some of those assumptions based on kind of where we think the trends are going. I'll take, for example, Arts and Rec Department revenues. They were severely impacted by the county health orders, not as a result of kind of normal consumer behavior. They were told some of their programs cannot operate or have to change significantly in how they operate. And so we've assumed a slower recovery of those, and they will be back to full pre-pandemic levels by fiscal year 25. So we've treated
that's a long recovery.
And so we've treated some revenue streams differently than just the straight 18-month assumption based on the information we have available today.
Okay, so the answer, if I can summarize, would be not only are we not ignoring it, we're taking it more seriously and assuming it's going to last longer in some cases.
Yes.
Could you tell me, and none of these charts actually reflected the detail on sales tax in terms of what the difference in sales tax results were in the most likely scenario versus the most conservative scenario? Is that available? Could have asked you.
It's about in the recent years, excuse me, it's around $500,000. But then that, because of the growth rates, it grows in the out years.
In terms of salary and benefit expenditures, I see that there is a number related to the benefits costs. May I assume that there is also some kind of growth factor on salary costs? You don't need to tell me what it is, but there is some. It's not assuming that it's flat. Okay. And what are we assuming? It says over 20 years, we assume that the pension discount rate will go from, 7.15 right now, and it will eventually get to 6 over 20 years. Is that going down every year, the discount rate?
It's a phased-in approach, yes, every year, incrementally.
So we're taking that 1.15 percentage points and we've divvied it up across 20 years and slowly whittling it away. Okay. And can you bring back the chart that was asked for by someone, and I was comparing it to the one in front of me, and it's the new chart, the 3A versus 3B.
Yes. Excuse my, here we go.
So I interpreted the question because we saw what the questions were, but the answer said, oh, we'll bring that tonight. I interpreted the question to mean that to tell us what the impact of only adding one FTE per year would be versus 1/2. And this looks like the assumption.
It was my question, and I
No, it does. Now that I can look at it and think about
correctly.
it, yeah, it is working right. Okay, thank you. Oh, I have one last question, and this is a typical question that I asked Dan. So in the out years, when we go into the red, what will happen is that, like in the first year, if we have $1 million budget deficit that's projected, we close the $1 million. If we do it with recurring and ongoing costs, that 1 million then basically continues into those subsequent years, because that's what happened recently. We actually had to fulfill the promise. But if we only take one-time cuts, like we stop a project and then we bring it back up again, then we don't get those compounded savings.
That's correct. There is a ripple effect for any decisions that we make in the near term when we model it out over the longer term. That's correct.
But that's not the way it works on the black side of the chart, or the revenue side. I mean, if you get an extra $1 million one year and you get an extra 6 million the next year, that's a total of 7 million over 2 years that you've had in surplus. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Matt.
Katie, I had a question about the same chart, 3A and 3B, and about the compounding effect. Just want to leave that teaser out there so that you get excited for my question.
Okay. Does it help to have it on screen?
It does. It's wonderful to have it on screen. So I'm trying to visualize and understand kind of the difference between 3A and 3B on the extra library hours. It was referenced earlier that number is about $560,000. Is it a one-for-one difference, or what is the compounding effect of that number going forward if we were to restore those library hours?
So we have the $560,000 is in year one. So fiscal year 22 on this chart. And there is a cost inflator applied annually to the actual cost of the library hours. So that's a compounding impact. So you have the $560,000 over every year, but then you also have that, I'll call it 3% differential, but that 2.7% differential. And then on the FTE side, you have the cost of the salary benefits plus any the pension cost and any the phase in of the discount rate over time as well. So those are the compounding inflators on the base cost. Mm-hmm. And then additionally, this is half of an FTE every year. So year, which is actually built in fiscal year 23. So fiscal year 23, you have a new half FTE. Fiscal year 24, you have that half FTE, which was added in 23, plus another half FTE. So kind of your delta between fiscal year 24 and 22 in that example is 1. And that half of a new staff person gets added every year in these scenarios.
What is the assumption used for the all-in cost of an FTE? Is it an average among all the employees?
It is an average, and we can break it out between a safety and a non-safety because the pension impacts are different. And this is a safety half of it. I'd have to go back and check which box I checked on this one.
Okay. And then just finally, if you know the numbers, what was our beginning balance in the pension trust fund, and what has it grown to?
I think we originally contributed, I'll defer to Dan if he has a better, I don't remember.
I think it was 18.5 million into the trust, and then we have about another $1.5 million in a pension reserve. So it's grown from 18.5 million to about 24.5, something along those lines.
As I recall, it actually dropped in the first year, so we've recouped that plus more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, Councilmember Darling.
Okay, and I'm still in budget 101. So some of these questions will be ones that I'm not thinking of until I'm looking at it here. But you guys are doing a great job of bringing me along. So because we've used contributions to reserves, or we've used reserves, well, we used them this year, we didn't end up using them last year. Is that changed the forecast on how much we're going to contribute to reserves in future years, or do we just kind of say it's a standard percentage and go forward?
So we're assuming that reserves will be fully funded in the forecast and per our current policies. So any amount, and it assumes it's building off of our second quarter update where we're using significantly less reserves based on our current projections for fiscal year.
We haven't dug a hole, so we're probably not going to have to fill the hole in the future years. And then on the assumption that you're using the existing contracts, we have 3 of the units, to safety and the Teamsters, that are not under contract right now. Is it just simplest to just assume CPI from where they were, even though they're not in contract? Is that create a risk to the projections, or is it more like decimal dust?
I would have to look at the specific by unit, the impact, but we have applied a inflator cost all. If there is no current MOU, we've applied the CPI inflator.
Okay. And then you said the cuts that were one-time cuts come back in next year in the forecast, and then the ongoing cuts are there, but the revenue enhancement, or the extra expenditures last year, which I think included the training and the mental health, are those carried forward, or are those just assumed to be one-time?
Those are treated as one-time costs.
Okay, and then the library hours, I think we've talked about that. It's about 500,000, and it's not in here except for in your scenarios.
Correct. We did not build it into the base scenarios. We provided as a supplemental, and again, that will be a policy discussion and when we're in the 22 and 23 during budget development.
And then on the difference between the most likely and the conservative sales tax, Dan touched briefly on this, the switch to online and the changes, that's going to be a big policy discussion for the whole state for a while. But is your conservative sales tax estimate kind of reflecting extreme Amazon expenditures?
So we're using the sales tax forecast from our sales tax consultants. So they look at all of the factors for what they're seeing on the ground in Walnut Creek and our internet sales from the county pool. We can get a little bit more, we can get more detail on what factors go into the conservative sales tax versus the most likely, but those are the projections that we're using as based from our consultant.
So it is kind of on the ground here based on what they're seeing, but recognizing there's a significant unknown about how behavior is going to shift coming out of the pandemic, just because that's uncertainty. Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Houski, do you have any questions on this? And I don't have any questions either. So, oh, yes, Dan.
I just wanted to add something, Mayor, if I could, before we go to public comment. So I'm going to generalize here a bit, but I just want to share a little broader context when we look at these numbers and scenarios and highlight a bit of an intentional strategy shift in the way we're presenting this. So in years past, we had a practice of recommending one finite scenario to council and asking council to adopt one scenario. And this year we're presenting these scenarios to share, what we think is most likely, but we don't want to hang our hat on any one scenario because as we've seen, we know it's going to be wrong. It's just a matter of to what degree. And so what we're really trying to convey is what are the sensitivities in the forecast and what are the key drivers and what is the range of what we're likely looking at heading into the future. And so what I want to draw your attention to, if you look at the 5 scenarios that were in the staff report and the additional 2 that Katie presented tonight. And granted, I'm going to round here a bit, so bear with me. But if you look in the short term in the first 5 years, we're roughly around upwards of a $2 million surplus. And if you look in the out years, we're at about a $4 million deficit. So really what we're looking at in an $80 million general fund is a range of a 2.5% surplus to a 4% deficit, which in the bigger picture is a pretty small range, which means we're in the realm of break even depending upon what the scenarios are and what decisions we make. And so that's really the broader information we're trying to convey in terms of how does this likely play out, and then to really identify those key drivers. So I can assure you that there are many cities that would be very envious of this forecast. And while we're trying to be realistic, where we have the discretion to be a little more cautious versus a little more optimistic, we are a little more cautious in many regards, not knowing, what could happen as we all learned this past year. So anyway, I just wanted to share that general context before we go to public comment and wrap this up.
Great. Yes, Cindy.
Could I ask the city manager a question, or it might take 2 questions? So you made your comments, thank you, made me look carefully again. What this doesn't reflect is that the pension cost escalations are actually projected to continue through 2034, which is at least 3, if not 4 years beyond where these numbers currently go. And it's that long before we see it slowly ramp down, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And as Katie noted as well, we did not include any use of the pension trust to help flatten that curve in those years as well.
And then the other thing is basically this also shows that we can't rebuild everything we own with the surplus funds that we will have over the next few years if we're careful. It's just not a big enough nut.
Yes, I would agree. If we're going to look to tackle any major infrastructure needs, we will have to have a discussion about funding.
Okay. All right, well, let's see if we have anybody from the public that would like to make any comments.
Mayor, I don't see any hands raised for public comment. Oh, we have Carol Weed.
Okay.
Hi, I'm sorry, but I didn't get a chance to speak in the early part of public comments. Is this supposed to be confined to the budget, or is this general public comments?
No, this is confined to the budget, Carol.
Okay, then that's not my topic. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any other comments on this, so we'll bring it back to council for any final comments or if questions suddenly arose. So why don't we start with the Finance Committee, and coincidentally, Luella Haskell's hand is up, so we'll start there.
Okay, so this is also an area where the staff has really shown their ability to balance practicality with caution, with judgment, with everything else. The one thing that I want to assure everybody that the further we get out from this day forward is the more likely we are not only not right, we could be astronomically wrong. This is only designed to give us trends that if all things remain equal, under our understanding. But it does give us, as Councilmember Silva pointed out, it does give us a frame of reference to look at some of the things that we have to consider going forward for the city, i.e. the fact that we do have serious infrastructure issues that we need to wrap our arms around. And we, unlike the good old days, we can't assume that we can generate the funds to make those improvements out of just the surpluses and one-time money that happens in the normal course of operations. So that is the real value of these forecasts. It gives us a sense about where we are and where we're going. Yet again, I am going to pat the prior people who were on council and the staffs before us who have set up a really conservative, well-balanced financial plan. And I agree with the city manager. I think even my personal family budget looking forward would be envious of the one that we have for Walnut Creek. So thank you very much for all the staff and what you've done. And I think you're using this tool to its maximum benefit for the well-being of the city of Walnut Creek.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Thank you, Mayor. And I concur with Councilmember Haskew. Thank you to staff and also to the foresight of this city and this council, past and present, that implemented features like this long-term financial forecast that it brings back every 2 years and checks its assumptions and provides input and feedback and is continually testing that. That model is very helpful, as well as the pension trust fund that you all were on council that established before I got on board. But I'm very glad of that. I concur with Councilmember Haskew too, that what we're looking at, relatively minor surpluses in the front years, are not going to be sufficient to address the major infrastructure issues that we see facing us in terms of pools and new community centers and things like that. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but we may even need to have a conversation about how some of those surpluses we might still need to invest in more funds into the pension trust fund to get out in those future years. So I think we've been prudent to date. We should continue to be so. And I just wanted to thank the city manager for wrapping it all up and seeing the forest for the trees.
All right, let's go to Councilmember Darling. I don't know if you had your hand up, but I saw a movement.
I was just starting to think about what I was going to say. I agree with Councilmember Haskew and Mayor Pro Tem Francois about the need to look at funding for those infrastructure needs. We're not going to be able to take it because my eye measures the black on the top of the line and the red on the bottom, and there's not enough differential there to come up with a 50-meter pool. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. I like the conservative approach here. I think it works well. Coming from a background in water supply planning where you're always wrong, I like the approach where we have multiple scenarios because it keeps us from, as this last year has shown us, nobody's right. And if you pick one scenario, you're really not going to be right then. So I would like to see carrying forward into the future, kind of a variety of scenarios so we can kind of test ourselves. It's more useful for me than one. But I look forward to working with you all and taking this fiscal foundation and moving it on and finding some priorities and figuring out what to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you and kudos to staff for not just bringing us forward a forecast, but having the tool. I mean, it was almost 3 years worth of work to build that tool so that when somebody asked a question this afternoon, hey, what if, somebody could plug and play those assumptions and actually be able to answer that question very quickly. And that is very helpful, both when you're looking at it in this way, as well as oh my God, we went off a cliff. Now what? You can start playing with those assumptions pretty quickly to see what's about to happen. I think also we have to remember that there is one big assumption that is out of our control, which are those pension costs. All it will take is CalPERS board to shift a 0.5 percentage point at one fell swoop and not spread it in over 5 years. And we are struggling even more than what it looks like. So this is just a reminder of that as well. And a reminder that we do not, as we've all said now, we do not have the years in which we were having $9 million surpluses year over year over year, which was 1990 to 2005. You add all that up, that's how they built so much in that short period of time, was the average surplus of $9 million. And so those days are long gone. This is an average surplus of just about net neutral based on the way you look at this. So thank you. And I'm glad that we also have alternatives to be able to see, because we don't get married to one, as Councilmember Darling said.
Right. And I agree. It's good to see these kind of options. It's also good to see how this works in a practical sense. We were talking theoretical 3 or 4 years ago when we first saw this, and now we're actually seeing the benefit of being able to look at the different scenarios on here. And as Cindy mentioned, if they change the discount rate, then suddenly, we're recalibrating once again. But I think we're in a good position for that, a much better position again than many other cities. And just keeping an eye on this, I think, will really help to benefit us for the years ahead. So again, thank you to staff, thank you to the Finance Committee, and I believe we're looking for a motion on accepting the report. And I see City Manager Dan Buckshire waving his hand.
Just real quick, if I could, I just wanted to add a couple thanks here as well as we're wrapping up to, as your council's noted, to all staff to have helped to provide input for this, a lot of folks behind the scenes. And then just to highlight, I always have to remind myself of this, that Katie and Kirsten have only been in their roles a little over a year. Clearly they have learned a lot in a year and have learned it all remotely. So extra thanks to them for bringing this forward. And I just want to, point out to give your council some much deserved credit that it was your suggestion a few years ago that we pursue an updated financial forecasting model that we obviously did. So that was, a lot of foresight on your part to bring this more powerful tool forward. And then obviously your council had to make a lot of difficult and unpopular decisions this past year. And clearly it's paid off. And as we've seen, there are other cities that have been unwilling to make those types of decisions, and they're in a tough spot. And while, we're not where we want to be right now, we're in a much better position than we would be otherwise because of the decisions that your council made this past year. And I think as you're all aware, at least from my perspective, decisions around budgeting and how we manage our budget are one of the most important things we do, because it really either stalls or enables what we can do and provide as a city to the community. And so the sound budget management by your council is much appreciated, and appreciate all the feedback that you've provided to staff as well. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, it's 9:01 according to my clock, and we are going to adjourn this city council meeting until our next regularly scheduled city council meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to accept the.
Oh, you're right. Wow. You see, Dan, you threw me off.
It's moved to accept the report providing an update to the 10-year financial forecast.
Second.
All right. Susie, let's take the roll call before I
Mayor
forget again.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew.
Aye.
Councilmember Darling.
Aye.
Councilmember Silva. And Mayor Wilk.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Now I will adjourn the meeting to our next regularly scheduled city council meeting on March 16th, 2 weeks from tonight. Have a good week.